Warning: disturbing content, viewer discretion is advised. Serious, Night Owls of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing that happened to you when everyone else was sleeping? When I was about 12 to 13, I was lying in bed reading one night, when I looked up and saw what looked like a man's head and neck lean into my room from near the ceiling on the outside wall. I say it looked like a man because it looked like a really bad 90s CGI. The skin was smooth, plastic-looking, and too orange. His eyes were hollow, making it look mask-like, but there was a deep red light that you could see through the eye holes. It very mechanically panned at a slow even rate from left to right and then back to center before leaning back out through the wall. Needless to say, I had a really hard time getting to sleep that night. I probably only slept for a couple hours before I heard my parents stirring around in the kitchen. The phone was also ringing way too much for how early in the morning it was, so I left my room and asked what was going on. Apparently, my uncle had gone missing the previous night after coming out to hunt on our land. His body was found hanging over a barbed wire fence at the back of our property later that morning. In retrospect, the weird face did eerily resemble his. I've never spoken to my family about it. A few years ago, I was on a camping trip with some friends. It was my first time camping in an RV. I have to say, it doesn't really feel like camping, more like a really comfy extended road trip, but I was glad we had the road that night. I was up late browsing through Reddit as you do, and through my open window, I heard someone open one of the compartments on the outside of the RV. Thinking it was my friend Josh who was bunked over by the outside door, I whispered, asking if he wanted to have a beer and go down to the creek. Instead of responding, I heard the gravel crunch as he walked around and jiggled the door handle. Thinking he locked himself out, I crawled down from my bunk and put my foot down right into Josh's stomach. He was pissed, yelling at me for not watching where I was going and upset that he was woken up like that. Plus, I kinda think I was dangerously close to stepping on his balls, but neither of us felt the need to broach that subject. I asked him who went outside and he angrily told me to go back to bed, that nobody was outside. So I did, not wanting to continue that unpleasant conversation. Early the next morning, as the sun was barely peaking, there was a loud series of knocks on the door. It was a cop asking if we had seen anyone suspicious the previous night. Apparently, some campers near us had been assaulted by some crazy guy who fled into the night. Using the timestamps from my Reddit posts, I was able to give him a reasonably close approximation of the time it had been when I heard the noises out the window. He told us that the campgrounds would be closed the rest of the day and we had to relocate. On our way out, we had to drive past where the crime scene must have been, and it was eerie thinking how easily that might have been us. When I went to visit my boyfriend at the time in Long Island, New York, for the first time, I stayed at his house. Because his parents were old school, they didn't let us sleep in the same bedroom, so they accommodated me in the den. Mind you, the den is below the house and is just a few steps above the basement. I woke up facing the wall and felt the other side of the bed sink as if someone had sat down on the bed, and the room was suddenly really cold. I got the hell out of there and made him switch me rooms. Something was off. Found out later, his grandma had died a few months prior. She lived, slept, and died in that same den. A couple of years back, I was staying at my grandparents' house for some reason. They live in the middle of nowhere, Australia. I was almost asleep when I hear this screeching noise from outside. It sounded far away and way too mechanical to be an animal. I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, when I start seeing these flickering purple and red lights out the window in the corner of my eye. Whenever I looked properly, I didn't see the light, but when I looked away, it was there. I thought that it was lighting, or something, but was rather spooked at this point, so I was Googled everything. I eventually get out of bed to investigate, and go into the kitchen where I would be able to see outside better. I sat in the kitchen for probably 20 minutes not seeing anything. I went back to bed and tried to ignore it. In the morning, I found out what had happened. In the area, it's not uncommon for people to steal cars, go for a joyride and then crash it in an abandoned cane field, and set it on fire. The purple lights were the headlights, and the red was the fire. When I was younger, I shared a bedroom with my older brother. I was in second grade, so I usually kept the door open to get light in because I was scared of the dark. My brother would always close the door and refuse to open it because he was bigger and older. I couldn't do anything about it. Well, one night, I woke up to a pitch-black bedroom. As my eyes started to adjust, I glanced over to my brother's bed across the room and noticed that he wasn't in it as I looked across the room where he was. He was standing right in front of the closed door, just standing still. Since it was really dark, All I could see was his black figure, a silhouette of a little boy. I didn't move a muscle. My brother stood in his position motionless for 10 minutes until I dozed off into sleep. To this day, the thought of what he was doing and the look of his motionless dark figure still keeps me up at night. My room used to be the basement. I lived in a two-small house with my separated parents, brother, aunt, uncle, grandma, and cousin. The basement had concrete walls and one high off-ground small window, so I put my bed as close to the stairs as possible and bought a space heater. But anyways, I still had trouble sleeping there, so I'd lay awake at night. One night I heard a weird sound. I heard a sort of squish noise and a deep groan, down in the basement with me, so I turned on my lamp that didn't quite light the entire room. I got up and was shaking with fear and was like, "Hello?" No response, but no way was I gonna sleep down there, so I grabbed my pillow and booked it out of there. But as I was going up the stairs, the sound came again, but extremely loud. It woke my brother in the living room. I've never felt more fear than I did right then. It's hard to describe the sounds. It was like a deep yell/groan. I always have my window open at night because of California heat, and one night at around 2 a.m. a sketchy white car parked in front of my house. No one got out, no one got in, and it left about an hour later. Nothing really happened, but the fact that I've seen it around the neighborhood multiple times, and I know they don't live here or anything because my town/neighborhood is very small, freaks me out a lot. The windows are tinted very darkly, and I know it is the same car because of the license plate, so I never really could see who was inside. Still freaks me out a bit when I see it around. I was pulling an all-nighter when I was in high school because I had an essay that I didn't start until the last minute. I was home alone that week because everyone was out of town. I was in my room typing on my computer and listening to music at full blast when out of nowhere, I heard my name coming from the kitchen. Now, my room was next to the kitchen, so I definitely knew it came from there. It was also loud enough to be able to hear it over the speakers. So I walked to the kitchen, and as soon as I do this, a cooking pan falls off the kitchen sink. NGL, it made a jump, and I immediately turned on the lights. Obviously, there was no one there, and it could have been my imagination and a coincidence that the pan fell. But I turned on all the lights in the house just in case. I used to live with my ex in a house where something did not like me. It got to the point where every single time I fell asleep downstairs, where his room was, I had sleep paralysis. One time we were cuddling, and he fell asleep before I did, and I started hearing growls and stuff. At this point, this was fairly commonplace, so I tried to just ignore it and fall asleep. When I finally did, I had a horrible nightmare that something was pulling me into the closet and beating me. I woke up to sleep paralysis and heard a deep gravelly voice say, "Come here, sweetheart," from the closet. I stopped sleeping down there after several experiences of seeing things down there while I was sure I was awake too, but that was fucking terrifying because I felt so helpless. Another time more recently, I was in Texas visiting my grandma, and everyone was asleep. It was very early in the morning, like 4 a.m., before I am finally asleep. After seemingly just a few minutes, I woke up to my toddler son, saying, "No," really loudly and forcefully. Look over, and he's still asleep. Look back to my right, and there is the shadow of a man standing a few feet away from me. I couldn't see well because it was dark, but there was clearly someone in the room. I got confused for a minute and said, "Dad?" thinking maybe he came in for some reason, but then the figure didn't move or say anything, and I realized it wasn't him. I freaked out and reached to turn on the extremely bright night light, and when I turned back, it was gone. I fucking hated sleeping there the rest of the time. To make it even worse, I was telling my sister about it, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I saw him the first night we were here." Apparently she was reading in bed and turned over and he was standing over her bed. My family has always been sensitive to this stuff, and my sister most of all, so she didn't mention it until I told her about what I saw. I've been kind of on the fence for most of my life about these experiences, but that put a bullet through the head of me not believing in the supernatural anymore. Alright, I have a bunch of things for this, so I'll write out a few stories. I'll sprinkle in some TL, drive. This one ain't really a super late night, but I was at a friend's house for a birthday party, and we watched exciting videos, the North American Stalker Creature, until 10 p.m. when we had to go home. After a long day terrifying each other, we were getting to my neighborhood when my friend points at a house and says, "I bet the rake lives in there," and has the points. The lights came on. As a bunch of 12-year-olds at the time, we freaked so hard. DL, Dr. Lucky coincidence. The next few are more paranormal in nature, the last will not be. Another sleepover this time. The time is about 11 p.m., and my group of 6-ish guys were at one of our houses. This was yet another birthday. His house has a walkout basement that had windows facing a quiet road into the neighborhood. Suddenly, car lights appeared facing the window, and by lights, I mean brights, and the car never moved, never started, and we never heard it drive into place. We did have the window open and haven't seen the car until the lights appeared. The car was a simple red sedan. Car shined its brights into the window until almost 1 a.m. in the morning, when without warning, they shut off. After all our conspiracies about the car, we went to see where it was now. The car had vanished with its light, the same way it appeared. No noise, no movement, not even headlights down the road. It would have went to avoid detection from the window, and we could see a long way down that road as it was out of the trees and flat. This is a collection of stuff. If you believe in paranormal things, then you may have heard of a rainbow vortex. It's a place where spirits gather to move on essentially. My house is located right at the edge of one of these. There's almost always something between the times of 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. It's 2:40 a.m. RN. Usually small things like objects rattling or sliding or footsteps, etc. I've gotten used to these by now. The weird things are sometimes the hallway will just flash bright light for no reason, think silent lightning, and no apparent source. I've only seen that twice. My desk now faces away from the door. The other creepiest thing is that my old laptop, which was 8 years old, had a battery life of about 5 minutes idle. Remember this? I had recently done a factory reset on it so we could e-cycle it later. It had been set on the kitchen table for about a week, and I had set it to mute and left it there to die. One day, at 2-ish a.m., the computer starts the setup sequence for Windows on full volume. I go out there to see what's going on and actually got the audio on a video. I opened the case, and it shut off immediately. I tried to power it on, and I couldn't, as it had ran out of battery almost 6 days ago. TL, Dr. Random Paranormal Things and a dead laptop speaking to me. Few more random paranormal things here. Not super late, either. One time I was trying to sleep when I heard footsteps in my room. I figured it was my cat, even though they sounded weird, so I called her name. She would then usually meow back to jump on my bed and commence suffocating me by laying across my face. But instead, the steps back out of my room, and I hear a solid on the wood floor and no more. Another time, I was out trying to find our outdoor cat who had gotten lost in the night, so I could lock him in the barn at night. I figured he got locked in the garage. So I went in to find him. He wasn't in there. When I was searching, I happened in front of the gym door at the back of the garage. While there, I stepped on a moth and hit my foot on the door. After just having watched a horror movie, the first thought in my head was, wouldn't it be funny if something knocked back? And I might dismay, something knocked back from the back left corner of the gym, where a few days before my mom said stuff had been falling of the walls that hadn't been touched in months. It was just 3 short knocks, but I got out of there fast. And it didn't help that I heard them again on the wall outside. And it doesn't help that a few weeks before my mom and sister were scared back inside when they heard a solid knock on the garage door when they were walking past it, so I had to go out and do what they wanted, and I heard it too. For those of you wondering, the cat was already in the barn. DL, Doctor Footsteps in my room, knocking in garage. I lied, there's more. I just remembered this when reading the rest of this thread. When my youngest sister was about 3 and learning to talk, we had a baby monitor in her room. We regularly heard creepy sounds from it, thinking nothing of it. Until one night, Maya is woken up to hearing a raspy, unintelligible voice coming over it. And my sister was responding. This directly next to my room. When my mom woke up, she was telling us about this when my sister says, I talked to the person at night in her innocent 3-year-old voice. Needless to say, she no longer sleeps in that room. She's almost 6 now. She still is afraid to be in her room for fear of things, namely ET for some reason, that may be in her room. She even refuses to sit with her back to that hallway. Damn dude, you should just write a book lol.